Welcome, everyone. Nice to have you here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. I started thinking about how people are coming together with so many different life experiences, cultures, backgrounds. But one thing that we all have in common is that desire and that need to feel empowered and to be empowered. What does that really mean? As I started to think about it, I thought that we have to experience empowerment. We have to know what empowerment feels like. When we're empowered, we feel confident. We feel courageous. We feel strong. We feel capable. We feel in control. We might jump right in. We might rise up. We might speak up. And we try new things. But when we feel disempowered, a lack of empowerment, we feel insecure. We might feel weak. We might feel small, hold back, might feel doubt, stay quiet, and we're afraid. This webinar is all about tackling those feelings that take away from our empowerment. I started thinking about what was going on in the world today with the global pandemic. And I realized that there's probably a really heightened level of fear, which means that we have a heightened level of disempowerment. And in fact, there was an article that came out talking about people are feeling more disempowered now because their choices are being taken away. When your empowerment is stripped from you, it's because your sabotaging voice is really loud. What is that sabotaging voice? It's basically your thought pattern, what's going on in your head that tricks people into thinking that they're protected, maybe from fear, from harm, from embarrassment or failure. But it is a tricky voice because it's a fake sense of protection. And in fact, what the sabotaging voice is doing is it is holding you back. The sabotaging voice is preventing you from having your own choices and from moving forward. It fans the flames of fear, and it strips you of your empowerment. And particularly now, during times of crisis, your sabotaging voice is loud. So the next 25 minutes, we're going to talk about how to name it, tame it, and send it away. Your sabotaging voice never completely leaves you. It's a part of who you are. But what you can do is really learn to manage it and control it. Perhaps you downloaded this one sheet of paper, which is a little worksheet. If you did not, don't worry about it, but do grab a piece of paper and a pen, because as we write things down, it helps us absorb and remember. But you're going to learn a lot of tools today, really tangible tools, and you're going to have to be patient with yourself because what you learn today might very well be something that's more of a process for you as you move down the road. I like to think of it as 3 big steps to manage your sabotaging voice. The first is building your own confidence, and that takes naming the sabotaging voice. The other is just increasing your control, truly getting to know it and taming that voice. And the third is gaining courage, which is where you have a choice to send it away. When you think about building your confidence, one of the first things you have to do for that sabotaging voice is acknowledge that it exists, to recognize that it's a real thing, to get familiar with the themes, to get familiar with the triggers, and even more so to begin to identify the disempowering thoughts. If you have that worksheet, the first fill-in is fear, insecurity, and doubt. Your sabotaging voice is a lifetime of your own fears, your own insecurity, and your own doubt. We all have different experiences, And we all have a sabotaging voice, but mine's different from yours because of my life experiences. What we really need to be aware of is, unfortunately, that sabotaging voice, that voice of insecurity, is generally much louder than our confident voice. You all have a confident voice. It's just you need to turn up the dial, the volume on that one, and turn down the volume on the sabotaging voice. And if you think about a confident voice, it's essentially your authentic self. It's that piece of you that wants to champion you and tell you to move forward, but it's often battling with the sabotaging voice. And you can call the sabotaging voice for now whatever you want. Inner critic, negative self-talk, alter ego. I like to call it the saboteur. My business partner calls it a pirate. She wrote a book on slaying your pirate. But for now, call it what resonates most with you. As you get more and more aware that this voice exists, you want to start to recognize the themes. And there are really two tracks, two basic statements. One is need-based statements that your sabotaging voice likes to grab onto. And then there are fear-based statements. So some of the need-based statements that are popular and common are to need to be perfect, the need to be liked, need to be in control, and the need to be respected. But then there are those fear-based statements, which is the fear of being unlovable, the fear of making mistakes, the fear of embarrassment, fear of being an imposter. I have a client who did add one to the needs. She said she had a need to feel appreciated. Take a moment and write down, if you have your sheet of paper, there's a spot for it right in the middle, and it says, write down the need or the fear that really resonates with you. And if one of these don't resonate with you, go ahead and write down your own, but take a moment to do that. Your sabotaging voice does not live in every single corner of your life. It is triggered, and it's triggered basically by habitual things. And when it's triggered, you have a bunch of disempowered thoughts that show up. But to know your triggers is important because it's going to help you manage and control the voice. So some of the triggers, for some people, it's just other people. It's a boss, it's a parent, it's a friend. For some, it's certain situations. Like every time you walk into a meeting and it's senior level people. But there are other things too. If you feel that somebody's being confrontational, when you feel a lack of control, that might be a trigger. And in fact, if that's a trigger for you, that lack of control brings out your most disempowered thoughts, you're probably hearing that voice pretty loud and clear right now because we have a lack of control of what's going on around us. But it might be when your character is questioned, or you, in fact, perceive it to be questioned, or when you're put on the spot. And I do have a client who, whenever she's put on the spot, when she goes to a meeting where she's not prepared, she feels all those disempowered thoughts. But what was interesting is that she was able to trace it back to an insecurity that began when she was somewhere in grade school, where the teacher called on her and she was unable to answer the question because she hadn't done the homework the night before. But that insecurity has stuck with her for decades into her adulthood. And it shows up now, of course, in avoiding meetings where she can't prep. So you want to have a sense of what are your triggers? Because when you're triggered, all these disempowering thoughts start to enter your mind. She's so much brighter than I am. I could have done it better. I should have tried harder. So as you get more familiar and you begin to gain and build your own confidence, think about what do you hear? So revert back, think about some of those triggers, the themes. And if you have a sheet of paper or just the worksheet that hopefully you downloaded, please do write down one disempowering thought that resonates most with you. It's usually a fairly simple sentence, but if you can capture it, go ahead and write it down. Recognize that we have a lot of thoughts that run through our mind that are disempowering. Often they are following 2 or 3 key themes, and they might be said a little bit different each time, but pretty much it's saying the same thing. So see if you can capture one of those thoughts and write it down. And the reason why you've got to identify the disempowered thought is because everything starts with a thought. So what I mean by that is a thought enters your head. That thought generates feelings. Those feelings drive your behavior. Where people have a hard time is somebody tells you, you got to speak up more in these meetings, or you got to be more confident. And you go into the meeting and you tell yourself, I got to speak up more. But that's focusing on the behavior. That is not focusing on the root of what's stopping you from speaking up. And the root of what's stopping you from speaking up is the disempowered thought. So remember that everything starts with the thought, which generates the feelings, which then drive your behavior. So think about it. You have a disempowered thought. Here are some of the most common ones. I'm not an expert. You feel insecure. You might pass on a stretch project. The common one, going into the meeting with people who are more senior, you feel incompetent, you don't speak up, and it goes on and on. This last one, I have a client who is experiencing this pandemic in a very, very difficult way, both personally and professionally, and not like many of you, I'm sure. But she has this mantra going through her head at how terrible it is. And it is. But as a result, she's feeling more and more helpless every day. And unfortunately, she's made a few poor choices. She's driven by that disempowered thought. Take a moment, look at that thought that you wrote down, and see if you can identify some really specific feelings, even one feeling, and a behavior that shows up as a result of that disempowered thought. And if you have the worksheet, it's right here in the middle where you can fill in. And if not, just follow the guide right here on the screen. This first step of building confidence is about you being aware, you acknowledging that this voice exists, because it does for all of us, beginning to recognize the themes, becoming aware of what triggers you, and identifying the disempowered thought. Personally, I think this is the hardest step because it takes a lot of self-reflection. The likelihood of it all coming right now in the 25 minutes that we're together is not very high. You're going to need to take these tools and practice and move them forward. It might take weeks, months, even years. But the next thing, as you begin to become aware of that voice, is to gain some control. Because if you can increase your control, that means you're facing it, you're knowing it, you're visualizing it, and you're meeting it head on. My clients have found over the years that one of the most helpful ways to recognize your saboteur is to give it some human-like qualities. What does it look like, feel like, smell like? Some of these things might pop to your mind right now, and it may not. But if you'd like, give it a shot. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples that over the years my clients have shared with me. They're not always human. In fact, one of my clients felt like her saboteur was a little troll. I don't know if any of you played with these. I did. But it was a little troll. And she ended up finding one in a toy store, old toy store, used toys. And she keeps it by her computer. So when she feels a saboteur showing up, she can look at the little troll and remind herself that is not the voice she wants to hear. Another client one time just told me it looks like an angry Santa. But as I said, it's not always a person-like figure. A client of mine just kept describing sort of a slimy, green, chirping noise. And one day she realized, my gosh, my saboteur is more like a frog. But it may not even be a living being. Sometimes it's really hard to put it into words. And for a particular client of mine who was drawing her saboteur, she just kept drawing sort of a big black cloud and realized that when her saboteur shows up, she feels like she is swooped up by a tornado. Another client described it as this tightness around her whole chest. She said it's like a seatbelt. When she recognizes it's showing up, what she does is she reminds herself to loosen the seatbelt. There's the devil sitting on your shoulder. That's more of a common one. But another client told me, this is a fake picture, by the way, but another client told me that it looked like her mother in a younger version with gray hair. So think about your saboteur for just a moment. Grab onto that disempowered thought, look at it, and see if any sounds or feelings come to mind when you think of your saboteur. I'm going to share mine with you. So the saying, the disempowered thought that comes up for me for umpty years is keep trying. It's not perfect yet. Keep going. You can do better. And it always sounded like a school teacher, strict school teacher, just kind of scolding me. Now here's the thing, what it looked like. That came with time. But I often saw what I thought was kind of that fake perfection. That woman, tall, skinny, and high heels, holding a cocktail, looking kind of elegant. And it wasn't until a few years ago when the brand called Skinny Girl Cocktail came out. I don't know if any of you remember, but I looked at that bottle and I saw that logo and I thought, that's her. That is my saboteur. And every time she showed up, she reminded me of that popular girl at school that really wasn't very nice. And she stopped me from taking risks. But more importantly, the minute I saw her, I knew her name. And I can't say it on a global webinar, but she was skinny blank to me. That's her name. And that's how I refer to her. You can all say it yourself. But it really came to life finally when I could see her. So as you go through this process, what's happening for you is you are beginning to tame this voice and feel more in control. You're stronger than it is. The more you visualize it, meet it, personify it, make it real. And you're going to feel that suddenly you're controlling it more than it's controlling you. So these first two steps, building that confidence and increasing your control, are the hardest, as I mentioned, really because they require you to dig deep. But as you dig deep and you increase that self-awareness, you move into that place where you gain courage. And what's great about courage is suddenly you have a choice. It's your choice whether you want to listen to that sabotaging voice. And again, it never fully leaves you. It's a part of who you are, but you can learn to silence it, to tell it to bug off for a little while. So these first two steps, name it and tame it. Now you have to think about sending it away. It's going to require shifting a mindset, consciously changing your thought. So if you remember, thoughts, everything starts with a thought, and feelings equal your behavior. So when we change from a disempowered thought to an empowered thought, your feelings and your behavior are going to change too. So take my client, the one who had that experience when she was in grade school, put on the spot. She walks into meetings. The disempowered thought that has stuck with her for years is, I'm so bad at this when I get put on the spot. I sound stupid. But in working to really recognize what triggers it, what it sounds like, she now preps herself before a meeting and says, I know more than they do. If she doesn't have time to get prepared for that meeting, she's okay. She's even gotten to the point where she's in the meeting. She might get asked a question and she doesn't have the answer. But she's more comfortable saying, I'll get that for you at a later date. I don't have it now. Because she keeps reminding herself that she knows more than they do. So think about what these empowered thoughts can do for you. Reminding yourself you're an expert, or telling yourself it's okay if you don't know. I've got this. Reminding yourself that it's okay if you don't know everything. But when I think about that client of mine that was talking about how things were so hopeless for her, and she was making these poor decisions, she started to shift that thought and to say to herself, I'm going to learn from this. We're all going to learn from this. I don't know what it is, but we're going to learn something. And she started to feel stronger. And for herself, her family, and her business, she started to take some steps to plan for the future. And she was suddenly more empowered, taking charge of her own life. So now, go back, look at that disempowered thought. If you've identified, cross it out, and see if in the moment you can replace it with an empowered thought. And as you replace that thought, what are the new feelings? What's the potential new behavior that's going to show up for you? As you build courage, it takes a lot of practice because courage is like a muscle. And courage is something that gives you the power of choice. The choice to listen to that sabotaging voice or not. And as you gain that courage, you will need to intentionally and consciously change your thought. Always remember the formula. Thought plus feeling equals behavior. I like to just simplify T plus F equals B. So as you silence your saboteur, that's you gaining some control over that piece of you that is not allowing you to feel empowered. But as you begin to silence it, you empower yourself. And the important thing is to recognize you have a choice. And sometimes our saboteur is going to be present. It's okay. But the important thing is for you to be able to silence it when you really need it, to leave you alone so that you can make different choices and move yourself forward. Always remember 3 big steps: building your confidence, that level of awareness, naming it. Increasing your own control over it means you've got to tame it. You got to face it head on, know what it looks like, sounds like, and gain that courage to send it away. But that's up to you to reflect, to dig deep, and then to step in and consciously and intentionally change the thought. Because empowerment means managing that sabotaging voice, naming it, taming it, and sending it away. Thank you all. That was a quick, brief, very important message. And I hope that you'll take the time to practice on your own using these tools. I know that there's going to be a follow-up worksheet if you'd like to download it. But we have time for some questions, don't we, Michelle?
Yes, we do. This is Jennifer. First, thank you so much, Sarah, for such insightful talk. We do have a list of questions for you, and I'll start with the first one. How can we be sure that there will not be resistance when we stand up to our saboteur?
Oh, there will be resistance. It's a difficult process, but you have to take it in slow steps and be patient with yourself and start to recognize first your triggers. Then you start to recognize the sabotaging thought. But there will be resistance because it's strong and it's human nature to want to protect ourselves from fear and embarrassment and failure. So I would say accept that resistance and just start breaking it down and chipping away at it. Each time you take a step forward, it'll get easier and easier.
Thank you. I think that's good advice to make sure that we're not too afraid of where we are and make that step by step. Now, the second question. So if your thought is that you aren't an expert or just don't have enough experience, how can you overcome that without the time it takes to get more experience, etc.?
Well, you've got a thought that's telling you, I have to be an expert. That is a disempowering thought for you in that moment or that experience or that time of your life. So you got to change that thought. You've got to say, this is a time in my life where I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. I'm going to learn from others. But having that thought that you should be an expert is your sabotaging voice telling you. And anytime you use should, by the way, that's your sabotaging voice. It's a hint.
Great, thank you. Now another question. The person asked, I always thought that you shouldn't go there Isn't that counterintuitive?
You know, I almost put a sentence in there at the beginning because yes, it is 100% counterintuitive. Most of your life, you're told, don't listen to that voice. And the truth is that is what we're trying to achieve, is that ability not to listen to it. But when somebody tells you don't listen to it, that's great, but how? What you learn today is the how. And it happens all the time in work when somebody gives you feedback. You have to speak up, be more confident. And you're like, great, okay, I'll work on it. But how? So this is the how part to get to where it is you're trying to go and not listen to it. So yes, it is totally counterintuitive because you must get very in touch with it and listen very closely in order to get to the other side.
Great. And along those lines, another question, any tips on how to actually tame your saboteur? Like facing it head on can mean a million things. So maybe several examples of how we could tame that?
Well, I would say break down these various steps. The taming part of it is knowing it well enough that you're getting in front of it. It's not sneaking up on you. If you practice the human qualities, see if anything comes to mind. But it truly is a process. And in truth, doing this in 30 minutes is almost a very counterintuitive way to teach people to manage their sabotaging voice. But these tools are tools that you're going to have to practice with baby steps. But taming it is getting to know it. It's truly recognizing it, looking it in the face, hearing it, feeling it.
Great. And I think your worksheet could really help with that too. Now, one question that's more specific to this conference theme is, are there any particular advice towards gender roles-based sabotaging?
Men and women, everybody, of course, has a sabotaging voice. And, you know, for women, sometimes the perfection theme is a really strong one, trying to be perfect, and the need to be liked is a very strong theme. I wouldn't say that research supports that women have it so much more than men, but this is mostly from my clients. I do obviously a lot of work with women executives. And what is interesting, and I hope all of you realize this, is that this voice is a challenge for experienced, grown, very senior women as much as it is for younger women. And what happens for younger women nowadays is they probably are getting some learning and development, some training. There's a lot more openness in working through things like your sabotaging voice. But for women who are a little bit more senior now, I mean, I was in the workforce 20 some odd years ago, nobody would talk about this. So it was a very private thing. So women who are more senior likely haven't ever really had the chance to work on it. So we all feel it.
Thank you, Sarah. Now, here's a more situational question, so maybe you can advise on how do we move forward with that. So there's this person who struggle, I'll talk in two areas where they would appreciate insights on how to handle it more positively, as they often feel intimidated. The first situation is when the meeting with high rank executives, because the old thinking that I was feeling constantly evaluated, and also that they hold higher position and power. Mm-hmm. And the second situation is when speaking with people who are extremely smart, think fast on the feet, and they might even jump into comment when I haven't had a chance to complete what I was going to say. So I tend to let them talk, and sometimes their assumptions weren't correct, and you don't even feel like you have a chance to correct their wrong assumptions. So I think this person recognized that they need to think about how to say it, since they may have a short attention span, but what can they do?
Okay, I think I'm hearing two questions. One is, what do you do when you're with more senior people? And the truth is, yes, they're more senior. Remind yourself they're more senior. But I always say, remind yourself that you were invited to the meeting, and you were invited for a reason. And it's likely not just to take notes. So go in with that mindset that you feel more empowered, so that if you have an opinion or you need to speak, that you're feeling more confident. Now, the one where somebody interrupts you, there's so much that goes into that. I mean, it's introverts and extroverts and rude people and respectful people. So I don't really have a straight answer there. But if you're trying to find the confidence to maybe put that person in his or her place a little bit, you might wait till there's a lull and then remind yourself that you have something important to say. And it would be beneficial to your audience to get the right answer, because I think you said that that person was giving incorrect information. So take that deep breath and remind yourself that whatever you have to say is going to benefit others, and it's worth saying. So again, it's just setting yourself up with that thought that's going to empower you forward rather than make you retreat and stay quiet.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. And I'm afraid there's still questions in Q&A, but we're running out of time. So I'm going to pass it to Michelle to kick off the next session.
Thank you very much. And that was Sarah Benenson Goldberg, founder of SBG Leadership Coaching and Consulting. You'll find her bio on our website. And now we're going to transition over to our panel. Sarah, would you mind letting me share my screen?
Yes, sure. Go ahead. All right.
Thank you.
Does that work?
That works. I have the honor of introducing the panel, Women in Product Innovation, What is the Panacea? I'm Michelle Kaiser, Staff Technical Account Manager at VMware. In this interactive session, the panel will explore innovation through an engaging discussion with women leaders who are making an impact in the areas of engineering, strategy, early stage investments, go-to-market, and product management. They are frequent speakers at conferences on topics of technology, inclusion, and diversity, and have presented at IEEE Women in Computing, Global Tech Women, Grace Hopper, and Society of Women Engineers. To kick off our panel introductions, I would like to introduce you to our first panelist, Minny Walia, Senior Director at VMware. Minny Walia is a seasoned business operations leader with extensive experience in multiple functional domains. She has run the business, leading several teams to drive business transformation and generate revenue in fast-paced environments at Cisco and VMware. In her current role at VMware, she leads go-to-market business readiness for all new products and services launched in the company, and she is passionate about nurturing and growing talent. Minny?
Thank you, Michelle, for the great introduction. If you wanted to stop sharing the slides, then we can, just a second. Yep, thank you. So would like to welcome my fabulous colleagues on the panel, as well as the virtual audience. We would have loved to host all of you on our beautiful Palo Alto campus. And if you see my backdrop, there's a beautiful cherry blossom tree. Those are what are blooming on our campus right now. So I thought of bringing a little bit of the campus to all of you. So let's do that with our panel introducing themselves. We'll start with Claudia first. Go ahead, Claudia.
And very excited to be here. Happy virtual Cinco de Mayo, everybody. I'm a technical advisor to startup companies in Silicon Valley. I have been leading product development teams at Oracle, Adobe, and Microsoft for many years, as well as many small and large companies. And I'm a doctoral candidate researching strategies to increase the pipeline of women engineering and computer science. Very excited to talk about innovation in large companies today and the intersection of diversity and innovation. Thank you.
Thanks, Claudia. Jin, you want to go next?
Sure thing. Thank you, Minny. Hi, I'm Jin. I am currently an engineering leader for Facebook. I have worked in a variety of different sizes of companies. And in particular, I've had an opportunity for CA Technologies to run their accelerator. So it's very much like building a startup inside a large company. In this panel, I'd love to share a little bit more with all of you guys about the lessons I learned.
Great, thank you, Jen. Monica, how about you?
Hi, I'm Monica Shen, and I'm a Director of Technology Strategy at Cisco in the Chief Technology Office for Enterprise Networking. So our group incubates new technology and figures out what concepts are really going to work. And then we partner with the main engineering and product management organizations to bring them to market. Just on the side, my background is in product management and collaboration, telepresence and video. So it's especially exciting for me to see that this panel, this whole event, and basically the world as we know it is really moving to go over video. It's really fun time. Obviously not all fun, but the technology is good.
Great, thanks, Monica. As you all see, we have a diverse panel, very talented, tons of experience. So let's go ahead and kick it off, an exciting next 20-25 minutes. And we'll start with the panel sharing their personal journey of innovation and influencing technology in large companies. So let's go ahead with Claudia first.
Yes, thank you. Then I wanted to start talking about what's the difference between an idea and innovation. It's execution. Then everybody has ideas every day, but not all the ideas become products or innovation. And when you join a big company, many of us, we feel like a small fish in a big pond, and that things are going to be very difficult to change. Now, many times we think about innovations as new technologies or gadgets, and that's not necessarily the case. You know, it can be also a change in an existing business process or an existing, just as an existing technology, you know, just making something better. Let me tell you a super quick story. Then I joined one of these big companies and in the international team, and I had to basically optimize one of the processes. I quickly found out that I needed to manage the translation of hundreds of at hundreds and hundreds are actually change these screens. Then I had to think how I was going to move this idea forward in such a big company. Then first, you know, I let my idea sink in and, you know, a little bit of time to investigate in work. I more people to work with me, you know, team, a group of allies to basically help me to drive this idea forward. And you need people who are against your idea, as well as people that are advocates for your idea. Then you need those two types. Finally, you know, working as a team, you come up with something better. And it's the last part is the hardest part. That is actually letting it go. Because sometimes your team doesn't have the resources or the time or the talent to basically make it happen. Then you basically, I had to go pass on this project to somebody else in order to execute it. And then it became an innovation. Then as you see, you know, innovation is a process that we can all drive and at any different levels and any different times. And with that, I get back to Minny. Thank you.
Thanks, Claudia. Thanks for sharing that perspective. That's so true. And I think let's go to Monica next to hear her perspective on this.
Yeah, innovation in big companies is so fascinating because there's so many different resources. So there might be multiple different CTO teams. There might be an innovation center that supports a startup ecosystem or future acquisitions, special teams, and there'll be innovation projects within engineering, which are particularly important for ideas that are close to the customer experience. It's also really good for morale. And then there'll be patentathons and hackathons, demo days. So all these sources are really good. It's not a bad thing where people say, oh, it's too confusing, you should really try to narrow it down. In fact, I think you should encourage that because ideas really come from a very wide range of places and we should encourage that. The key though is to make sure there's a lot of communication. So all of those groups, you know, as much as you can, be very open about what you're doing and share your agendas and your plans, because what can happen in a large company is the left hand doesn't always know what the right hand is doing. And so as much as possible, share your tracks of thinking. Maybe you can look at each other resources or knowledge or share other pieces of, you know, goodness that'll get you further along. The other thing I would also encourage is to look at how an event is marketed. So for example, if a hackathon is marketed for hardcore rock stars and that's how the email goes out, you may not get as many women participating, for example. It's shown that that happens pretty often, that it's sort of a turnoff. So what if instead it was about, like, we welcome your creativity, we want your, you know, that kind of thing. So think about, like, it doesn't mean you can't market it one way, but maybe you have two types of messages or multiple types of messages that go out, so that your innovation in your company really attracts people from lots of different directions. And I'll share two examples of innovation that I've worked in. And one was a wireless project that our team incubated. It's something that allows you to connect Wi-Fi easily in a new place as you could connect to the cellular network. And so we incubated this idea in our group with a number of engineers and helped them build ties to the engineering organization, you know, help the product management figure out what the business case was going to be. And then as it was sort of getting ripe, they all transitioned to the main business unit. And that's where they got the full market and solution push. So it doesn't always have to be your idea. It could be someone else's idea. And you know, give people credit, help them make it happen. Or it can be your idea and then you help somebody else make it happen too. That's the power of having a very broad team, is you can do all of those things. And the last example was when I was in product management, our engineering organization would have these demo days periodically, usually once or twice a year, where people would share all their craziest ideas, really fun things. And I felt like as a product manager, I was going shopping and going and seeing all these, sometimes it was just slides, sometimes it was very early proof of concept, but it was such a great idea to share ideas and say, hey, this can solve a customer problem. This can move things forward. Let's take this and make it a more serious project. Thanks, Minnie.
Great, good stuff, Monica. And I think in terms of, you know, when you look at the perspective of large companies and what does it take, I think your examples and what you shared, the perspective is spot on. So thank you. So that leads me to my next question, which is more around the perspective of importance of women in product innovation, right? Why is it so important, and what's the impact that women drive in shaping strategies, shaping policies, shaping key decisions in product design? And Jen on our panel here has a wealth of experience in this area, so definitely wanting to have her share her perspective on this.
Thanks, Minnie. This is, you know, the most fitting place for us to toot our own horn, as Sarah has just taught us 30 minutes ago, or actually 15 minutes ago, right? This is a gathering of women in technology, as well as a very strong, you know, support system for women in technology, right? I know here online we have a lot of our VMware colleagues, you know, men or women, and we're cheering each other on. So this is a great time to talk a little bit about women's unique contribution in my personal experience as far as innovation in large company is concerned. I'd like to share a couple of examples, right? So when I was running this accelerator inside the large company, there are many textbook answers that we know to follow, but there's all things that we desperately wanted to try for, you know, just the purpose and the focus of the accelerator, right? At the time, being super new, we have access to a very large, very well-established existing customer base. But at the same time, you know, we are up to find out what is the right problem to solve and making sure there is the right problem market fit here. So the first example I want to give is I happen to have Kyoko, our designer, on the team. She's a woman, and she, out of her own interest of learning, went to some meetups, you know, professional meetups in the evening, talking about design, and specifically design for enterprise software, right? Specifically for that type of user. She came back extremely excited. She's like, wow, Jen, I spoke to who and who from this company. They do, you know, some video capturing, you know, in motion technology. They're very latency sensitive, and they're extremely interested in, you know, this product idea that we're in the process of building. So I got agreement to do a 30-minute interview there. Tell me what are the 3 questions we should go ask to get this, you know, problem market fit validated. This was such a excitement for the whole team, because, you know, she did this on her own. That was not her day-to-day job, right? She's our designer to look into problem market fit. And yet she got this great opportunity and trusted resource. So we have her go ahead, and she actually did a lot more of those along the way, you know, using the same way to acquire these additional information. And I learned from her. So one day I was having lunch with one of our contracting companies, helping us to recruit. So part of the accelerator, I do have some freedom of building our teams. So some of them are FTE, and some of them I was able to use contracting resources. And then this particular contact says, you know what, Jen, if you guys are interested about talking to the IT leaders or CISO leaders, right? These are the chief information security officers. We happen to serve a lot of them. Maybe I can introduce a few to you, right? I was like, please, that would be awesome. So in these two examples, you will see both of us being women, we tried some very unconventional ways to acquire information, to gain access, and we gain indeed very helpful information to further validate our product fit and move the project forward. Now, by all means, these, you know, did not happen only because we're women. Quite frankly, this could happen to any team members, but I want to share these examples to show the value of diversity. There's tons of things we already know from the book, from previous experience, but just because we're having a very different team together and has very wide coverage of diversity, the potential, the idea, you know, the different approach that's out of box can be the most valuable surprise here. Back to you, Minny.
Great stuff, Jen. And I think your examples with the accelerator and how one opportunity led to the other, that was pretty good. And I think, if I may ask, can you also share with the audience, as part of this work, you also envisioned kind of your class that you teach for the most, you know, the lovable product, right? So maybe you want to share a little bit of that with the people here?
Yes, thank you. I think that's fitting too, right? As you know, our community here, we support each other. So obviously, whatever lesson we learned, if we can share, like what we're doing right now, or if we can scale that sharing, that's certainly a very valuable thing. So Minny, as you said, as I was, you know, going through my lesson learned, running this you know, startup inside a large company, and realizing, you know, innovation inside large company can be very, very different, right? From what we talked about being
Right.
founders and start your own idea. And usually it's you and your co-founders, you know, working in a garage. The challenges are very different. The access is very different. So I decided to put a talk together. I first put it, you know, shared this by presenting to one of the Product Tank meetups. And then I got, you know, a suggestion from the meetup attendees to say, you know, Jen, you should put a class. So I pitched this class to Stanford CSP. That's our continuing study programs here. And I've been teaching that class now for several years in a row. In fact, right now we are doing this one virtual as well for the current spring quarter.
Great, thank you. So if there's any interest in, you know, anybody wanting to check it out, you guys can go ahead. So just building a little bit on, you know, this theme, Jen, I wanted to take it a little bit further with, for the leaders in the virtual audience, as well as, you know, people managers, along the journey of you taking on expanded role, scope of work increasing, right? What were the leadership competencies that you needed to stay mindful of as your own work increased, and what the expectations of your teams were of you as a leader? So if you wanted to, you know, share some thoughts on that.
Leadership competency. You know, first thing, when Monica was early on talking about communication, right? That's very top on my mind there, because when you are innovating inside a large company, the need to communicate, and the need to communicate in a very inclusive way, in the example she gave earlier, super valuable. I also get reminded of what in our first keynote this morning from Catherine Finney, right? She talked about, you know, this concept of driving diversity from a leadership perspective, right? Be very intentional, looking for the sponsorship, right? For both for the leadership talent, but also for your product idea, and then also look back to see who is it that I can sponsor, right? This is really what she was talking about this morning. These are also, very relevant in my experience. If I am here to share one more example, right, besides what Monica talked about and besides what Catherine shared with us this morning, I would say that's about earning customer trust. And the reason I bring this up is because in my case, right, when you're innovating within a large company, you tend to have access to your existing customers. And then it became very easy for you to mistakenly say, they're my paying customers. They're loyal to me. They come to my customer conference every year. They advocate on behalf of me inside their company. And therefore, this is proven. I no longer have to prove this to them. This is the danger. When you do a new innovation, when you roll out a new feature or new capability, when you receive these confirmation from your customers, right? Is this just being polite, being kind, because you are part of that existing company that they've been paying and using as a supplier? Or is it because this is truly something that addressed their need, right? Throughout my validation, we actually did several iterations of our idea. And I realized initially there are a lot of courtesy, kindness, yes, versus later on the super passionate, yes, you're solving my problem. If you have this ready, I'll be using it tomorrow, that kind of excitement. So I think the key leadership competency here I want to share is a little bit less about the conventional leadership competency that we're all familiar, but it's more about when you're innovating inside a large company, know that you have to earn the trust from your customers. So be super humble about it and really validate.
Great. No, those are all great points, Jen. And again, I'm just going to share my moderator hat for a second to share a little bit of a perspective from my side, right? You mentioned the circle of trust. That is just so critical as you expand on the scope of work or, as well as bigger team sizes. And for me personally, it's about also, given I'm really passionate about our talent pool, people, I wanted to make sure as the work grew, the teams expanded, that I can continue to make time for people, the talent, so that we don't just get bogged down by the aspects of work, but can continue to, make sure there is time where I can mentor, make time for the talent pool. So that's been sort of really, critical for me from a leadership competency. So just wanted to share that perspective. So let me get back my moderator hat back on, and then switching gears to a little bit of, Monica and Claudia, both of you as leaders, and having also known you as fabulous colleagues on this journey of, being in prior sessions, both of you huge advocates of diversity and inclusion, what you do in your communities as well as the work environment. So wanted to have both of you share your perspective on why is this advocacy so important? How have you led with it? Any real-time examples that you can share with the audience here. So let's go ahead with Monica first and then Claudia.
Thanks, Minnie. And Jen, I totally want to take your class, so we'll have to work that out. So, I think we understand why it's important to have diversity on teams. And Claudia will probably talk more about that too. But, I think so. I'll talk about this opportunity that we have here. Right now, when people are hired in at entry level, it's already gender imbalanced. And maybe at the beginning, it's not super gender imbalanced, but once you get to that first level of promotions into management, it becomes clearer and clearer that for, I think Wall Street Journal published an article about this last year where it's showing, what happened to leaning in. It's not making a difference. For every 100 men promoted to first-line manager, only 79 women are. And it gets worse at each level because it compounds, of course. So when you look back at, okay, well, what happened before that step, before that promotion, that can be the place where we can take a step to make a difference. So this panel is part of the executive leadership track. So, what can you do as a leader? One of the things is to look at career development at the beginning of a review cycle. So if at the end of the time you're looking at promotions or whatever reward there is, and you say, well, how did everybody perform? Or maybe he achieved this big goal, she didn't achieve as big a goal. One thing to look at is, were they given the same opportunity at the beginning of the year? Because studies have shown that it's very often the very same person, that one rock star guy that gets the big assignments, that maybe leads to opportunities to speak at a conference or train other people in a new technology. And those opportunities are not evenly distributed among the team, and especially among people of underrepresented backgrounds, whether it's women, whether it's different ethnic backgrounds, and so on and so forth. So something that you can do to really make a difference is, at the beginning of those cycles, take a look at who's getting those opportunities, and give those fairly, and then measure, and then everyone will have a fairer shot. So if you're an individual contributor, then you can ask those questions of, are there opportunities that I can reach for, that I can stretch for, and make your desire to get those big assignments known.
Great, thank you, Monica. Claudia, you want to go ahead and?
Yes, thank you, Minny.
Sure.
Then, you know, for the last 20 some years, I have been working with diverse teams, with global product development, with people from all over the world. And these challenges are very close to my heart. You know, I'm currently an officer for Society of Women Engineers, leading the affinity group that are basically all global people from all types of background, different genders, different ethnicities, you know, just different geographies. Then that's what really makes a diverse team. Then, but we do all understand that diverse teams are, you know, the way to go for innovation, right? They all bring all these different perspectives. Yes, that's what the research does say. Well, not all the time, because leadership, it plays a critical part in making these diverse teams successful. Then, first of all, you have to find your team mojo. And as Monica was saying, you know, having a framework, a communication framework where everybody understands how they're going to communicate across regions, across generations, is going to be incredibly important. Having a very clear North Star direction where everybody understands where are we going, you know, having a clear goals, that's going to be very important. Having clear roles and responsibilities, and something that I've learned is having a very clear decision-making process is going to make a big difference on driving these teams forward. And you know, and the last thing I want to add is that, you know, diversity for some reason in the last few years has gotten this like bad rep. Then we need to make diversity normal again, where people feel that they can speak up, that they can make mistakes, you know, that we're in a safe space to work together, and that we're in this journey together to learn from each other. You know, I'm from another country, I don't know all these different rules, then please teach me, right? I'm an American, by the way, but I was born somewhere else. But anyway, you know, we are in a new era where we are all you know, the same height. We're all the same color. We all look like our driver's license pictures. Then, you know, this is a great opportunity to make innovation and diversity work. Then with that, you know, I bring it back to Minny to close. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, I think we're going to pause here. We would love to go on a little bit longer, but I was just looking at the time. So we probably have time for 2-3 questions. And if I may, I'm going to just read them from the chat, and I'll have each of you address one. So let's go with the first one here. How do I, as a woman, contribute without asking permission? Jen, do you want to take that? Oh, go ahead, Claudia. Please, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just do it. Then I actually, my screensaver is it says just run. And it's because I basically, you know, I move forward if I have an idea, but I actually do it intentionally. Somebody was mentioning this, I think Monica or Jean, you do have to be intentional about it to move forward, but also it's not a hero's journey. You should get a coalition. You know, that's something that I learned. You really need to have your team or somebody behind you. And with that, you can basically move forward. For some reason, as women, we think that we are like super women or Wonder Woman, and we have to do everything ourselves. And the reality, it takes a village.
Definitely.
And I'm dead.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. So let me pick another one here. Innovation and technology requires not just technical skills, but also a lot of soft skills, such as analytical thinking, creativity, growth mindset. Do you see enough support from your managers on soft skill development within your companies? Companies such as Facebook and Microsoft have leadership development programs targeted at the top 6%. What suggestions do you have for women in the 94% bucket to develop the right skills to drive innovation? Monica, do you want to take that?
Sure.
Given your perspective from
I'd be happy to. Yeah, and I've seen that happen also where, you know, just a handful of people will get nominated to certain leadership programs, but there's so much you can do. Often, like those same companies that were mentioned in the questions, they'll have a lot of coursework in their company learning and development organizations that you can sign up for. Sometimes they're free. Sometimes they're a tiny bit of money. It's like $200 or something like that. And that's almost better because then it's an opportunity to open that conversation with your manager, because your manager now knows that you're interested in taking a growth mindset class, or you took a weekend seminar on your own time on something that's similar. And once your manager knows that you are doing those things, somehow you suddenly become in that top handful of people that gets nominated for all these other programs as well. So there's a lot you can do in small ways to grow yourself that way, and also simultaneously put you in that bucket that gets a lot of other opportunities.
Great, thanks, Monica. And we have one for Jen, where the comment is, it's a comment as well, a question. Agree with Jen, women have different ways of getting things done, but we get them done. How would you handle a male manager who micromanages and thinks that his ways are always the best ways, and insists that team members do things the same way instead of empowering us to be more creative? Thank you.
That's
so
a
Jim.
good question, and we've all can relate this in our work experience. I would say first, let's have some empathy with this manager. Why is this manager, assuming this is a male manager who, you know, clear about his own, why is he this way, right? Could it be that in the past he's already got, you know, inconsistent results or missing expectations, which sort of, like if we relate back to what Sarah taught us, you know, 30 minutes later, what was that experience that caused him to become this way? So first, let's have some empathy. And then two, I would recommend, let's go just have a, ask for very small things, maybe fairly accountable scope, right? And sort of set a caveat and ask the question. This is kind of like my teenager negotiate with me. Do you care about the outcome that I get the dishes done and nothing is broken? Or do you care about a particular way, you know, whether hand washer or using the dishwasher? So if I say, no, I don't care, right? Let's say, wait, if you can get that agreement with the manager, use this small controlled scenario to prove that you can actually do it and give this desired outcome that he's looking for. I think this would allow you guys to sort of get into that next conversation and take on some bigger tasks. And hopefully over time, this would help this manager to recognize his own bias and start to be more and more empowering for not only yourself, but also the rest of your team members. I hope that helps.
Great, thank you. We would love to take more questions, but I think we are a little bit over the time. So first of all, I want to thank the people who have helped us put this together. So Michelle, thanks for the introductions. Amy and Jennifer, thank you for manning the chat window. And a big thanks to my colleagues here who were part of the panel. So thank you all. Have a great day.